This is Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. I've noticed that this game is getting kind of beat up in the ratings over the last couple of days, and that's probably for a relatively good reason, but I also think there's something to be said about games like this because they don't come around too often, but this game is kind of a blast to play. To be honest, it is nonsense, it is very stupid, but it also knows that it's stupid, and that's kind of the deciding factor for me, right? I can enjoy a game that is ridiculous, but that is self-aware enough to understand how silly it is and doesn't expect you to take it seriously. It's the games that are just over-the-top ridiculous but yet expect you to take them seriously and don't seem to be self-aware that I have a problem with. So I actually tend to enjoy games like this because of their stupidity factor, especially if they have really stellar gameplay, and in this case, Stranger of Paradise actually has one of the most fun combat systems of this type of game that I've seen to date. So yes, the story is very silly, kind of throwaway, although it does have a couple of interesting ideas because it's sort of like an alternate dimension retelling of the very first Final Fantasy, which does have some mileage in it as far as like neat ideas go, and the characters are two-dimensional at best for the most part. I mean, the party members that you get, basically you're all holding the same pet egg, and therefore you are all destined to be in the same party, and that's basically as complicated as it gets. There is a little bit more to the other party members that you don't start with, but even then it's pretty simple. It's basically just you beat the crap out of them, and therefore by anime logic they have to join you on your journey now, and that's basically all there is to it. And the story is equally ridiculous, but there's something to be said about a game that is over the top and silly, but still has really competent and extremely well executed gameplay. This game is basically from the same school that started around the PS2 era and brought us some really fun games of the time, games like God Hand, games like Chaos Legion, games like Devil May Cry, especially the third one, and has continued into this day as something that happens occasionally with like the newer Devil May Cry's, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, games of that nature that are very silly, don't expect you to take them seriously at all, but have extremely stellar gameplay to make up for the fact that the story is nonsense. So those of you that have played the Nioh games might recognize some of the combat in the background right now as looking kind of similar, and in fact other aspects of the game like the menu interfaces and stuff also looking very similar, and that is because this is by the developers of the two Nioh games, and in fact it does use, I think, the same engine, and it definitely uses a very similar combat engine with very similar controls and ideas, so if you've played Nioh and especially Nioh 2, then you'll probably be right at home in this game in terms of how it actually plays. Now, pretty much all of the depth and complexity that could have been used in a story or in more believable characters was put into the combat system of this game, so that's where all of the depth comes from. And it creates this really fun, super aggressive, I guess kind of Souls-like experience. I mean, it's not really that similar to the Souls games when it really comes down to it, but it is obviously evolved from Nioh, which was more similar, so you can see where the sort of DNA lies in terms of where this idea of a combat system actually came from. And the main combat has some really neat ideas, actually. It uses a combo system that I really like because it involves making your own combos, which I've mentioned before on this channel is one of my favorite things of games like this, when they allow you to actually create your own combo strings and stuff. I tend to get really into it, and this game is no exception. You have a series of light attacks to create a basic combo string that is unique to each different weapon type, and you also have a series of different sort of heavy attacks that represent all the various MP using skills that you can obtain, combo skills, from evolving all the various jobs that you get. This game does use a Final Fantasy job system, and every job has its own skill tree. As you level up that job, you will get points to spend to develop that skill tree along its various branches, and oftentimes at the bottom of these skill trees are new jobs to unlock as well, until you of course get to some of the later advanced jobs, which are sort of the last of their line. So you can go from, say, Ronin to Samurai to Ninja, and a lot of the jobs are returning Final Fantasy classics like Samurai, Ninja, Warrior, Berserker, Red, Blue, and Black Mage, all sorts of things like that, but there are also some new ones that work a little bit differently. So next to classics like Dark Knight, you also have new things like Void Knight, which is really fun, by the way, because it has the Runic ability, and it works just like Runic from Final Fantasy VI. That allows you to basically hold up a shield that absorbs magic attacks and then allows you to redirect them back at enemies for huge damage, and is very fun to use. But yeah, like I mentioned, in addition to each job's specific function, the sort of unique thing that they can do, they also have various combo attacks for different weapon types that they will be able to unlock in their skill tree. And the cool thing about these is once you unlock them, you can use them on any job. So if you unlock, say, a bunch of greatsword skills from the Warrior and Knight jobs, but want to switch to Dark Knight or Paladin, you can actually take those other skills that you've learned from those jobs and fit them into your various combo strings. So this encourages you to develop as many of the jobs as possible so that you can get as many attacks and combos and things and other activatable abilities that you can get, because once you unlock them, you have them no matter what. So you sort of mix and match all the various bits and bobs from all the different jobs that you've mastered so far in order to create your sort of perfect character. There are a whole lot of different positions that you can insert all these various different combo skills that you get to create your own combo strings. Basically different combinations of light and heavy, like light heavy, light light heavy, charge light heavy, and all of your various traditional combo attacks that you get in games like this. So there's a lot to choose from in terms of how to actually customize your various combo strings to make them how you want. And this is one of the main features of the combat that makes it really stand out and makes it really enjoyable, because you can have two jobs equipped at any given time and you switch between them with a simple button press. You can even do this as a cancel during combos and other actions and things that allows you to alter up your strings or do some other dodge-based stuff and things of that nature. You actually have quite a lot of defensive actions in this game. You have a block, a parry, a soul shield, and a dodge move, so you have quite a few different ways to actually avoid damage. I think this is mostly because the game itself is very extremely aggressive, like almost Bloodborne levels of aggression. You need to be attacking almost all the time, and all the various defensive maneuvers that you can do are meant to be done very quickly and timed very precisely to where you're not having very much downtime at all. Most of the combat is focused on this yellow gauge called a break meter, and different things, especially your various combo strings, deplete this break meter as they connect on enemies. And once the break meter is completely depleted, you can go up to them and do a finishing move that will kill them no matter how much health they have left. So this is actually more important than their health gauge, and this is also how you increase your own capabilities, because all of your various combo strings take MP to use, and you only start with 2 MP segments. However, as you do these finishing moves, you get more and more maximum MP and restore the MP that you've lost as well. So you want to be doing these as often as possible so that you can string together longer and longer combos. But you also have your own break meter that you have to take care of. As you get attacked by enemies, this will deplete. If you guard attacks, it will deplete more. And if you use something called a soul shield, which is sort of like a parry, it is a timed guard that can defend from almost anything and cause you to take no damage, and will also deplete the break gauge of the enemy that you guarded the attack from, as well as restore some of your MP. So you want to use it quite often, but it's dangerous to use too much, because as you hold the shield up, it depletes your break gauge very quickly. And the combat punishes you very heavily for having your character broken. If your break gauge depletes completely, you are defenseless for several seconds. You won't be able to attack or defend or move or dodge or do anything. You'll simply kneel on the ground for a couple of straight seconds, which in a combat engine that is this fast-paced and aggressive means you're probably dead. So you really don't want to have it depleted all the way. You have to take care of it. It's sort of like watching your stamina gauge in Dark Souls. It's that similar sort of feel where the language of the combat is sort of based around managing this gauge as a resource. Even boss enemies have a break gauge, and you can even end their phases early by depleting their break gauges, and it will just simply deplete the rest of their health gauge down to their next phase. And each boss that has multiple phases has a health gauge that is split into several segments representing each gauge. And there are even some very hard bosses that you absolutely have to deplete their break gauges to kill them, because they can regenerate their health, or they overall just have such a tremendous amount of health that you'll have a very hard time actually killing them the old-fashioned way, and instead you have to get creative with your combos and attack their weaknesses in various ways and use your job abilities intelligently and things like that to deplete their gauges quickly. And this is actually how you kill Tiamat, for instance. Tiamat is a very tough boss that is a huge difficulty jump compared to everything that comes before her, and you absolutely have to, at this point, know how to use your soul shield and your various break abilities as effectively as possible in order to deplete her maximum gauge and her other gauges, because her health gauge can regenerate endlessly. So she's basically like the final exam for the game's combat mechanics, and you actually encounter her quite early on as well, so if you don't have them mastered by that point, then she will wipe the floor with you very quickly. Another neat thing about the Soul Shield is it kind of acts like a limited version of blue magic. Sometimes enemies will use skills against you that have a purple glow to them. The name will appear above their head in purple, and if you block these with the Soul Shield, you'll actually not only take no damage, but you'll obtain that ability for yourself. And using this skill doesn't take any MP at all, but it has a limited number of uses that is unique to each skill that you'll learn as you absorb all of them. And almost every enemy in the game, I've noticed, has at least one of these skills that they can give you, and some enemies have sometimes 2 or 3 or more. And there are even some boss fights, like the Elemental Core boss fight, for instance, that rely heavily on you being able to block these attacks successfully and use them against them for huge stagger damage. You also have an Estus-like potion system where you have 5 potions that refill at every checkpoint, which are simply called cubes because they look like cubes. So again, we're dealing with some very simple writing here. And once you go to the cubes, it will respawn all enemies and give you all of your MP back and all 5 of your potions back. And sometimes enemies can drop potions, so you can go above 5, but you will only regenerate up to 5 whenever you go to the cubes. So that's mostly what you'll be dealing with for bosses and things. And dying carries the interesting penalty that you'll be sent back to the last cubes you rested at, and it'll actually deplete your maximum MP gauge, all the way down to the 2 that you start with. So all the extra MP that you've generated from doing finishing moves on enemies can actually be lost if you keep dying. All of this comes together to make a really nice mixture that creates a depthy, enjoyable, satisfying combat system with a huge amount of variety, making your own combo strings, having each of the different weapon types usable by different jobs, and each one having its own different combos and things available to it, and its own mechanics. Daggers can create after images of you to attack faster, greatswords can be charged for huge stagger damage, lances and spears used by jobs like the Lancer and the Dragoon have various different combo abilities and attacks that they can use that do different damage types depending on how you're holding the directional stick when you attack, which is kind of cool. It gives them some extra flexibility with their physical damage. And it even has the classic Final Fantasy full 8 elemental damage system. So yeah, there's a lot of depth here to the combat. It's clearly where most of the love went in terms of the game's development, although I will say I do appreciate how almost every level is sort of a love letter to a different Final Fantasy. If you're like me and you've played all of them multiple times, then you'll recognize that every level has various callbacks and references to different Final Fantasy worlds, which is a nice little touch, and it makes the game feel kind of like a love letter to Final Fantasy in general, while also not taking itself seriously enough to be impactful on the canon or anything like that. If I had some problems with it, besides the obvious deficiency in the story and character department, it would be that it gives you way too much gear. Like, it just inundates you with huge numbers of gear drops, and it gets very tedious to sort through all of it, because you'll finish a mission with like 30 or 40 or 50 or more different pieces of gear that you didn't have last time, and then you have to sort of compare for each of your characters and things, and it gets a little bit tedious with its menu systems and everything. It's a problem that Neo has as well, and it definitely carries over into this because it uses the same interface. Although one problem this does have that Neo didn't is that each mission is a pretty significant gear level increase from the last mission, which means that if you want to grind up some better gear to be better equipped for the current mission, pretty much only the one mission before it is actually relevant, because anything before that is going to be dropping way too low level of gear to matter. You'll just be wasting your time. So you only really have like one mission and maybe one side mission that you can grind at any given time for job levels and new gear and stuff, because each is in a very linear path from mission to mission, and each one is such a large increase in gear level that any more than one behind where you currently are is just too low. But honestly, I'm a big fan of this game. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and I just can't hate it, no matter how much people seem to want me to. I really liked Stranger of Paradise. It is very stupid. It is an incredibly silly game, but it's also so much fun to play that it doesn't really matter to me, because I remember games like, of course, Devil May Cry, like Chaos Legion, like God Hand, games that were over the top and ridiculous in a lot of different ways, but still had such an enjoyable combat engine to back them up that you just couldn't put them down. And I think Stranger of Paradise is a blast. I love the fact that it's kind of a Final Fantasy love letter. I love the fact that its characters are so stupid sometimes that it wraps around to being really funny with some of the stuff that they say in cutscenes and things. And I think there will always be a place in the games industry for games like this, for games that just want to focus purely on a really cathartic, fun gameplay experience and just kind of throw story and characters out the window. But I also think that as much as I enjoy it, it's important to mention that to people, because, some people, they want to play an RPG to be engaged in an interesting story with believable characters. And if that's what you're in the mood for, then this game is not going to give you that. But if you just want balls to the wall, aggressive, Souls-like combat gameplay, then Stranger of Paradise has that in spades. Now, of course, there is the issue that this game is currently exclusive to the Epic Store, which is a big albatross around its neck and is very unfortunate. And of course, I would never suggest that you should go out and pirate a game, because I am a reasonable, responsible consumer advocate. However, what I will say is that because of Epic's incredibly anti-consumer practices and their very shady exclusivity deals, all of the copies of this game have already been paid for from the multi-million-dollar exclusivity deal they cut Square Enix to publish this on Epic. So that means that pirating this game technically has no negative effects to them, because the games are already paid for and the money has already changed hands, and what you decide to do with that information is of course entirely up to you. But that is Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. I really enjoyed it, but you have to sort of shut your brain off and be in the mood for just a pure gameplay experience in order to really get the most out of it. I'll link the store in the description below this video if you want to go check it out yourself. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.